Hey everybody, you're watching We the Fandom, where we discuss comic books, pop culture, and the fandom experience. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to see more content. How's it going everybody? Jacob here at We the Fandom reviewing episode 2 of Loki. I gotta say, I was once again pleasantly surprised. This episode had less info dump, but more meta commentary. Far better than any that we saw in either WandaVision or The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. In this episode, we get to see pretty quick that Loki gets to already go on a mission with the TVA to a Ren Fair in Wisconsin in 1985, looking for the more dangerous variant Loki. They get to the crime scene where some hunters had been taken down and one had been kidnapped, and basically that when they're there, Loki goes on and on about how he knows what the variant is doing, knows their schemes and everything, but after a while, Mobius figures out that Loki has basically just been stalling for time, and so they end up going back to the TVA. Back at the TVA, Mobius, now disappointed in Loki for having wasted everybody's time and tired of his constant distractions, sets him up with desk work. Basically, Loki is given the files on all of the attacks perpetrated by the variant Loki, and after what I assume to be hours of study, suddenly Loki has some sort of epiphany. You see, Loki figures out that the variant is likely hiding in an apocalypse event, and explains his theory to Mobius. An apocalypse event, as he explains it, is basically a catastrophic event, that even if you went to that time and tried to change things, the event would happen anyways. So, as long as they kept going back to right before that catastrophe happened, the variant Loki is likely using that apocalypse event as a home base. Loki and Mobius end up testing out this theory by going to the famous or infamous volcano explosion in Pompeii during that eruption. And despite Loki talking to the villagers and revealing that they're from the TVA, there were no alterations to the timeline. Now, there is a point after the first failed mission where Mobius goes to Judge Renslayer to get approval to continue to use Loki on these missions, despite his previous trust issues. While he's in her office, he notices that she has trinkets collected from some of his missions, but a couple that weren't, and later mentions another analyst that she has on the side. This could just be a throwaway line for the sake of humor, but I wonder if this is actually a hint at Jonathan Majors' Kang the Conqueror character, who we will see in the future of the MCU and who in the comics is romantically involved with Ravonna Renslayer. Now, I did mention there would be some meta commentary in this episode. This is partially to do with Loki, but also to do with the TVA and Mobius. Because at the beginning of the episode, and throughout, Loki notices that Mobius is always reading a magazine with jet skis and asks him why. Mobius basically explains that there was a point in the 1990s where the ultimate example of form and function came about, that being the jet ski. Now, I kind of thought this could possibly be a comment about his seemingly sympathetic attitude and kind of affinity for Loki throughout these past two episodes and how he treats him. But then Loki proceeds to once again make fun of the space lizards who run the TVA as well as the function of the TVA itself, and questions why Mobius and everyone else there just goes along with it, because the whole idea of the TVA and the sacred timeline is pretty ridiculous. Mobius counters by asking Loki where he's from, like he's basically saying, you know, who created you, who raised you, frost giants, Odin, god of the heavens, and all these mystical realms. All these notions are ridiculous if you think about them too hard. Now, whether or not that's a comment on fans looking too hard at the MCU with all their theories, I'm not too sure. But this is definitely going to be a running theme throughout the series, and hopefully we'll find out what's really going on behind the TVA in the finale. Alabama 2050 Hurricane at Roxcart, which is a store much like Costco, which is part of the Roxxon oil business in the MCU. This is where Loki and Mobius believe they will find the variant Loki. After getting approval from Judge Renslayer, they take a full team of hunters and arrive at Roxcart. But despite his protests, Mobius and Loki are separated because that female leader of the hunters wants to keep an eye on Loki herself. Of course, a few minutes into the mission, she ends up getting possessed by the alternate Loki. The two Lokis talk about their various plans as the variant keeps possessing different people, but when Loki requests the variant helps him to take over the TVA, the variant denies him and they start fighting. Now, the variant had set up those time reset devices all over the store and basically rigged them all to go off at once. They're not going off in the store, they're actually being sent somewhere else to detonate. I'm guessing they were sent to the timekeepers, because earlier in this episode I mentioned one of the hunters was kidnapped by the variant, and it's now revealed at the end of the show that she shared the location of the TVA with that variant. Of course, this him turns out to actually be a her, and while I had assumed this was a version of the Lady Loki from the comics, it turns out it's not. Some eagle-eyed fans found out that in the Spanish casting list, the actress we thought to be playing Lady Loki is actually playing a character named Sylvie. Now in the comics, Sylvie Lushton was the second version of the Enchantress, a regular human given magical abilities by Loki and who came to believe that she was actually an Asgardian herself. So that's kind of interesting. I'm wondering how she ties into Loki in the show and why she's considered a Loki variant. The MCU does like to switch things up from the comics, so we'll see. But the episode ended with Loki following Sylvie through the portal and leaving the TVA behind, so I'm sure we'll learn all about her character in the next episode. As always, leave your comments on what you thought about this video. Also, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.